Unless you have served in the military, you probably don't understand how large it actually is. From the 750 different duty stations to the 800 plus jobs across the 6 branches, trying to navigate your way through, especially at the beginning of your career, can be overwhelming. Trying to make the right choice to reach your goal should always be your deciding factor. When I was enlisting, I received more advice than I knew what to do with. Veterans and active duty service members all had their own perspective on what branch is best and why I should or shouldn't do different jobs, specialty schools, etc., etc. The majority of my recruiter's advice wasn't the greatest, as I discovered after I enlisted. Although, there would be one piece of advice that a veteran buddy of mine and one of my recruiters both shared. This advice would be the reason I had the opportunity and privilege to serve in the U.S. Army's Honor Guard and eventually become an operations NCOIC well before I should have. The advice was, if the Army offers you something, you take it. When I initially was enlisting, the majority of my recruiters were infantry. So after I took the ASVAB and did well, they were doing everything they could to convince me to still go infantry, which was against the advice of most of my non-infantry recruiters. I personally was enticed by becoming 11 Bravo since combat MOSs have a 3-year active duty obligation instead of 4. But the thing that convinced me is that airborne school is at Fort Benning. My recruiters told me that if you go infantry, you practically are forced to go airborne. So I signed on the dotted line. Right before I shipped off, they told me that when I get to reception to tell the intake personnel that I wanted my airborne option and that I needed my E3 promotion since I had done some college and went to military school. When I explained this to the intake staff, he smiled and laughed and said, if it's not in your contract, you're not getting it. Needless to say, I was sour that I had been tricked. Fast forward about a week into reception. One day, the entire reception battalion was sitting in a large room. A sergeant first class walked in with a patch I'd never seen before. It had a picture of a sword over the Washington Monument with a tab that said Honor Guard. He walked to the front of the room and said to the huge group of us, if you have below a 110 on your ASVAB GT score, you can leave. The majority of the room got up and left. Next, he said, if you have an airborne contract or option 40, which means going to Ranger selection after basic training, or 18 X-ray, which means you're going to Special Forces selection after basic, head out. Another big chunk of the rest of the room left. Finally, his last requirement was, if you're under 5'10", kick rocks. When all is said and done, there were about 20 of us left. He began his brief by saying, let me tell you about the old guard. I won't go into the specifics of his recruitment points in this video, but they turned out to be exaggerations at best. At the time, they sound amazing. I had never heard of the old guard before this. After my last recruiter experience, I was hesitant to accept. Ultimately, I did agree to go the old guard after I thought of the most important advice I'd received before going in. If the Army offers you something, you take it. Also, after military school, I had always wanted to earn some type of tab, so at minimum, I could cross it off the goals list. Although the old guard was not what I expected it to be, especially as an infantryman, the network and experiences I had were invaluable to get me to the point I'm at today. When I was in my first platoon, we lost our team leader to a leave of absence. My acting squad leader at the time asked if I wanted to fill the position. Knowing that the soldier I was going to be in charge of was a problem child, it wasn't the most appetizing promotion. But I remembered, if the Army offers you something, you take it. Fast forward to now, I can tell you that not being a team leader of a soldier that was on an AWOL watch list would have been more relaxing. However, having team leader for soldiers of the Army's Honor Guard Presidential Escort Platoon on my resume was a very helpful bullet point. After my first year in Honor Guard Company, I had a choice to go to the Regimental S Shop and have an incredibly easy job, or go to battalion to be the RTO, which is essentially a hybrid between an executive assistant and administrator position. My platoon sergeant spoke with me and gave me his recommendation to go to battalion. I had a tremendous respect for him and took his recommendation since the Army was offering me something. I seized the opportunity and was able to work alongside field grade officers, senior NCOs, and absorb as much responsibility as I could. Long story short, I became the S3 Operations NCOIC. During my time there, I met the mentors I still have to this day. This position was the catalyst that taught me about leadership, operations, investing, and overall life progression. All of this was from one simple piece of advice. If the Army offers you something, you take it. If you made it to this point in the video, I appreciate you watching. Hopefully that golden piece of advice can help you in or out of the military. Please leave the video a like, and if you want to see more military content, I'd greatly appreciate a subscription. Remember, take care of yourself and take care of each other.